Are you looking for a podcast where you can hear from real people regarding their real dental drama? If so, then you've come to the right place. Join hosts Bethany Petty and Dr. Rena Kuba as we dive into the solutions we've created and the mistakes we've made while managing dental drama. Let's get started.
I'm back. It's good to be back in the closet. I've been MIA for a little bit here.
I know. We've been missing you. We've needed you.
Well, I don't agree with that. I've listened to the podcasts and I want more of Mr. Petty back. He's hilarious. I wish I could have been a fly on the wall in here watching you two facial expressions and whatnot. But for anybody who thinks that there was drama, maybe Bethany and I got into a fight, which is why I wasn't here. The drama. Sadly, there is none. Not sadly. I guess it's good. There was none.
It's not sad. That's a good thing.
It's a good thing. So what have we been up to?
I know. I don't know.
I don't know either.
Well, you've had a lot of additional things on your plate with conferences that you've been to, and you've been out of town a lot.
I think that's where I've been out of town here and there some, yeah. So that, I think, to me, was one thing I wanted to talk about. You and I, the Abilene, we had talked about our Abilene class, and I think that went very well. And the rest of the lineup for that morning, was MCS. So if anybody hasn't heard about them, fantastic, like revolutionary, and infection control. Yeah, really good topic.
Good company.
Yes. And Paul, I loved, his company and what he said, which I hadn't thought about. But he's like, in the last 30, 40 years, have there been any innovations in the infection control space?
Right.
I've never thought about that. Like, it's always been like cavi wipes and spray by spray. Anyway, so he talked first, then Dwayne Tinker with dental compliance and talked through all that gross stuff we all hate thinking about, but he makes it interesting. And then we spoke about bringing on an associate and all of that. And then the last one was about transitioning your practice.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of what I wanted to talk about with you, because I feel like, every few years I kind of get in that mode and funk of like, peace, I'm out. Like, I'm out, and, who's... anybody show up at my door with a contract, I will sign it. And like, take it. Come and take it.
I'm going to delete that part. Nobody heard that. She never wants to sell. You're going to have to fight to buy her practice.
Oh my gosh. And so, but I feel like that is kind of, I don't know if it's just the space I'm in, but I feel like, maybe the like attracts like. Like, I feel like I'm having all these conversations with friends of mine that were like, dude, I'm so damn tired. Mm-hmm. And I think, you and I talked for quite a bit on the drive back about me going, I can't ignore this. Like, I do need to look into this. Is this the smart thing to be doing right now? And what I mean is this, meaning, this whole thing about now is the time, the industry's consolidating and private equity. I know what private equity is, but really, do we all really know what private equity, you know what I mean? Like, I think of like Silicon Valley and private equity. And so I'm like, is that the thing? Like, is that what I should be doing? And, so I think that's what I was hoping to talk about today. Because I know like the thought process that I've had, especially in the last 2 weeks. And then, and I can talk about that some, but I want to kind of hear from you. Like, what have you heard? And maybe the why, what's leading me to this thought process, what's leading your clients to, and is this a good idea to look into, all of the above. So,
well, and what's interesting is I feel like a lot of people come to that thought process and maybe even to that decision to move ownership around, because of stress. So even just listening to you talk now, a lot of times we think about transitioning the practice over to somebody else as an easy button. Like, I just need something easy. And so even this week in my situations with a lot of my clients, it's the management of not only the practice, but the team, the patients. And it's just, we feel like we're constantly in this balancing act to make sure that everything stays in this equilibrium state. And one of the things that I've thought about this week even is this, what are options to kind of help the practice owner stay not in control, but where things feel balanced. And a lot of times we either think, okay, I need to sell, or I need to get out of ownership, or maybe, and I've had probably two in this last week going, is now a time for an office manager? Is that what I just need to do? Do I have too much on my plate?
I hit you with that 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we've done the leadership model for a while now, for what, 6-ish years, 7 years.
Yeah.
But I finally was like, maybe this is the transition I need, is to find a manager.
Yeah.
But I mean, you helped talk me off that ledge, but I would agree with everything you're saying. Like I've been, more stressed now, and I'm like, what is it? What is it that's bothering me? And I think it's that fear of, I don't think any of the workforce stuff has calmed down at all.
Right.
And people are still being poached, and people are still, grass is greener, which was interesting, actually. Went to a class on Friday, and the speaker was talking about, like, I guess he's an HR recruiting, helps you hire, and all of that stuff. And he said that the Great Resignation, right, like where 30% of the workforce, like 50 million people, quit their jobs. And he said of that 30%, 80% were not happy with their choice to leave.
Yes.
And then 60% or whatever percent it was that tried to get their previous job back. And so I was like, like, I hope some of mine, I hope that some of you people who thought grass was greener. Yeah. And even like on the news, when they're like, oh, all these layoffs are coming and employees are scared. And I was like, good, shoe on the other foot. Finally, like, the employees have had us. And now, and then like my dad just looked at me like, what is wrong with you? And my sister, like, the same thing. I was like, well, it's just as a practice owner, like, we've just been thumbed down for far too long. Like, good, like, let it be our market. But then, like, my sister pointed out, it's not our field. It's like all these other fields that, like, people are scared of losing their jobs.
Like, it doesn't matter as long as the message is scaring some people, then it's worth it.
Yes.
No, it I think we have been, waiting, like, is this environment going to change? And I have seen exactly what you're talking about. Employees that left that either were like, hey, can I get my job back? Or because I know, especially in the Metroplex, I have several clients all over the Metroplex where it's like, oh, this employee left here to go into a different field altogether. And now a year later, here they are applying at a different client's office. And I'm like, oh, looks like the dental field, called this person back. And so I do see some of the footprint of that. And then it kind of backs you up to go, well, could I have retained that? Was there anything that could have prevented that person from this great resignation that everybody was going through? Which
I'm going to strongly say no. I think that was the timing where everybody was like, I'm a chump for staying in my job. Look, I could have died during the pandemic, and so this is my new lease on life to see what else and go reach my true potential and gold. And at the end of the day, it all still boils back down to, you still have to make a living.
Yeah.
And
yeah. Which then goes to, okay, this stress of practice ownership and, should I sell? Should I keep my practice? Whatever. There's so much of it that whether you own the practice or whether you're working in a practice is out of your control. So to your point, like, could I have prevented that person from going off into real estate and somehow retained them? Most likely not. Would the corporate have been able, let's say a private equity owned your practice, would the corporate have been able to do that? Even less so, probably not, surprisingly. Their retention tools are no better than your, personal owner of the practice tools are. So there's this environment that exists out there that we just have to deal with, whether we're the practice owner or whether we're an associate in a practice. That is the environment. But are there things that we can do to potentially manage our personal stress better? And I do feel like that's where the question of an office manager comes in. And so I want to pick your brain on it, because I know I've had several clients just over these last couple months go, does this mean I need a manager? And so let's go over some of the pros, because you've done both. You had an office manager for many years and relied on her pretty heavily as an office manager. And then we shifted to a team leadership model. So I want to kind of talk about both of those models and ultimately all bringing it back to, at the end, is this a strategy for reducing stress and taking some things off my plate so that either I'm not selling or I am selling, right? So can you talk about when you had an office manager? What was the role of that person in your practice, and what did she do?
My vision for her, what I wanted for her, was to be the person that was kind of in the middle. So if I was being ridiculous, she would be advocating for the employees. If the employees were being ridiculous, she would be advocating for me, all through the lens of what is in everybody's best interest. Mm-hmm. And so, like, are there things that I'm not seeing or hearing, but she's the first one to get a whiff of something? So that's kind of was the goal, that she, kind of managed all the people who want, every other day off and putting in time off requests, or my kid, I lost my babysitter. And so, like, all of those things that, we're trying to do the dentistry.
Yeah.
All the things that, like, when you have an upset parent, can somebody else be the, soften the blow for the doctor? Like, can you have people in place that are going to solve that, or at least make a dent in it, to hopefully filter those out before I have to deal with every single one of those? Mm-hmm. Is it a person who, just kind of the quarterback going, how do we keep this flow going, mm-hmm. so that the doctor can do what she does best, which is the dentistry. And then, not that she has to be the one who does all the scheduling and the AR and all of that, but she's the one going, who's the right person to do this, and then helping them figure that out. So, like, for example, like, some of the things that I'm just like, why is this so difficult? Like, when people are like, oh, I didn't have time to get to the AR part of this, or I didn't have time, I was dealing with patients. But we're not here 12 hours a day like a lot of industries are, like, we're not here from like 8 to 8. Why did you not get time to do that? And right. I think, like, employees are really bad at seeing the big picture and problem solving on their own. And I would say that's maybe not even a dental problem. I think that's any industry.
I agree.
And so it's like, I don't know if, like, people just put on their blinders and, like, just focus on one area and have never been taught to, like, think outside. I don't know. I don't know what the problem is. I've never thought about it that long. But, for example, who's filling tomorrow's schedule? Like, is that not, like,
common sense?
Dentistry 101?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
To make money, we need patients tomorrow.
Yeah.
So does anybody call them? Huh? What do you mean, huh? What are you doing? Like, we're not that busy today. There's 3 of you at the front, and there's 3 patients coming every hour. Like, it takes 3 of you to manage that? Like, what are y'all doing? Well, the phone was ringing. We needed an estimate. Yeah, that's, like, par for the course. But, like, it takes 3 of y'all to divvy that up. Like, I don't... And fair enough, maybe I'm not up there and I don't know what the challenges are, but you are telling me all day long nobody had time to think about tomorrow. Well, what it boils down to is nobody thought about that.
Right.
And to me, I'm like, how can you not think about that? It's kind of the basics of, like, the front desk. Like, I don't understand. But if I come in and I'm like, hey, which one of you 3, I'm carving out time and I'll make an event in the schedule and put which one of you 3 is going to be working on phones at this time. And then which one of you 3 is going to be doing insurance verification in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. Like, and then it's like it melts away. It's like they all figure it out and they all do it. But it's like, I had to be the one to step in to put that something in place. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, for the love of God, mm-hmm. like, really? And so that's what I'm thinking. Like, would a manager be the one to come in and step in and do that? Now, my AR person, very intelligent, but I was looking at, we still look at kind of like the days of when I started the practice, and the bank made you track certain numbers, and I still track a lot of those things. Still have the same spreadsheet. We just add every year we add the new year to it. So I was looking at, for March, I was looking at where we were last March, where we were this March. Or maybe not, you know what? It wasn't even year to year. It was month to month. I was mm-hmm. looking at March and I was like, those numbers seem kind of high. And I was looking at February, and I'm like, it is higher. So like the 30 to 60 day had tripled from February to March. Outstanding collections, right? And I'm like, did she go on vacation? Like, where has she been? Why has this number tripled? Mm-hmm. The 60 to 90 had been cut in half. So it tells me she's still doing something. But how did this number triple? And then that's when I went back and I looked at, compared it to other months. I'm like, it has never tripled. What are you doing? Well, then when we look at it, that's right around where our, the person who kind of helped her with insurance verification when she got backlogged, left the practice. She was on maternity leave, doesn't want to come back, had made that very clear from the get-go. But to me, this AR person, then I'm like, we've got 3 people at the front and we've got 5 assistants now. And yes, during the week of spring break, we needed all hands on deck, but the rest of the month has been pretty slow. April's been pretty slow. Have you asked for help? Oh, I can do that.
Right.
Oh, for the love of God, please do that.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so who do you want to help you and what kind of help do you want? And it's like, okay, so this person is going to sit at this computer the afternoon of this day because the rest of the schedule, like, we're fully staffed otherwise. So take the one person and then these 2 can handle everything else and like catch up on that. Anyway, all of that to say, it's like it's taken me to step in to try to figure out, because people are just so stuck in their lane, they can't look at the big picture to go, wait a minute, we've got 5 people, we've got 5 assistants, and we needed all 5 during spring break. But now the schedule, like, we kind of need 3.
Right.
So maybe sending 2 people home, I don't want to do that. Like, where can we shuffle around? And I guess that's where, for me, I'm thinking, like, maybe this is what a manager would do. Maybe they would see the bigger picture where people don't and help with that.
Well, and I think there's, especially the manager that you had for all those years, we can absolutely build a successful manager-driven practice with the right person in the seat. And they do exactly what you're talking about. They're the ones that are problem solvers. They are essentially, if I could rename them, they would be the problem solver. That is what, in my mind, the office manager should be, that is most helpful to the practice owner, because ultimately, Sally called in sick because her son is sick. So I'm now the problem solver. So Sally's sick. We don't have her. What can I do to fix this problem? Am I calling in a temp? Am I shifting some patients around? Am I shifting team responsibilities around? Like, the buck stops with me. I'm solving the problem. If the, exact example, the schedule fell apart tomorrow, and I know that I've got great hard workers, but they're not going to think about that. Okay, I'm the problem solver. Tomorrow's schedule fell apart. How can I now delegate? It doesn't mean that I, the manager, am stepping in and solving that particular problem, but I am delegating. And I think when you've got a very intelligent person that is a strategic thinker, that model can work really well. And I think you had that. She was very good at the details and building systems and holding people accountable. I think what happened over time is she burned herself out on that. She got tired of being the problem solver. She didn't want to be the problem solver anymore. She had, solved problems for years at that point. And I think her expectations of people, similar to us, sometimes we get in the same boat as well, is, but they should be a problem solver. Yes, she is the receptionist, but she should also be a problem solver. And yes, I know she's just the checkout person, but she should also be a problem solver. And I think there is a ceiling that a lot of people have, and the reason that they aren't driven to become that manager is because they're not a good problem solver. And so I think the problem solver or the manager that you have in your office can easily get burned out by being the only one that's thinking like a problem solver. But the fact of the matter is, that's why you hired that person to be in that role. That is the title of their role, office manager. You're managing problems all day long, whether that's an upset parent or staff issues or an issue with the doctor. You're having to manage the practice owner as well, or the associate. And so I think it's a hard role to fill, and it's not filled well if you don't have a good problem solver in that seat.
And I think that's what happens a lot in dental, honestly, because the office manager ends up being the person who's been there the longest.
Yep.
Or who the other manager left and they were AR person and now they're filling in that role. And so it's like we've backfilled it in a way best as we know how. And then I think, okay, well then why don't I advertise on Indeed for looking for a manager, a problem solver, but then you got to teach them all about dental. And maybe you don't, and maybe you do, I don't know, but I feel like the one experience I've had with an office that I worked for, that the office manager knew nothing about dental. And she had been, I think, a manager at a bank or something. Well, it was very difficult then for her to really be helpful. She wasn't an advocate for either one, honestly. So if the doctor was upset about something, she'd just go yell at the staff. And I'm like, I could have yelled at the staff myself. I'm venting to you. I'm expecting you to come up with some solutions and then take it to the staff. But all you did was yell at them. So now the staff is upset and I'm upset. And you didn't diffuse anything. Or the patient. I still remember once a patient was upset. And I was like, but here's the issue. Like, I cannot help that patient because of whatever. Well, she just kept like listening to the patient's grievances and telling me their grievances. I'm like, I understand their grievances. But she didn't understand the solution from a dental standpoint because she wasn't in the dental field. She'd never had dental experience. So basically I was like, can you just step out of it? Let me talk to the patient myself. And so I think that's the challenge we come up against is that where do you find this unicorn of a person? And then the next onion layer that always worries me is, okay, I've trained you, I've coached you, you've gotten there. And then I'm always worried about, what if you leave?
Yeah. Then so much relies on you. And then the system falls apart because in a way, that person held the system together. If they're a good manager, in a lot of ways, that manager holds the systems together.
Well, and then a lot of it too, it's like they know they hold the systems together.
Yeah.
So I just, that's where I'm like, I don't like to be in that position. And in our case, the one who was my manager came to me after she'd been a dental assistant for a year. Like she'd finished dental assisting school and she was at an office where I guess she did her externing. They ended up hiring her. Well, she ended up shadowing that office manager and was like, that's what I want to do. I don't want a dental assistant. I want to do that. So she came to me and she said, well, I want to be a manager. And, eventually she had the dental background because she'd kind of been an assistant, not for very long, but kind of knew the challenges of being an assistant. And then she, was doing what she thought she wanted to do. Well, then, 2 or 3 years in, she didn't want to be the bad guy because she was now friends with these ladies. Now her manager had been, a couple of years older, like a decade older. Like maybe that lady was in her, like 35 and these young girls she was leading were like 20, 25. Well, my manager was 20, 25. Like, so she was like, ugh, I don't like being in this position. And I don't know that she truly understood what manager meant. I don't think she truly understood that she would be the one to solve problems. And to your point, then she got frustrated. Why won't these people ever pick it up? They will never pick it up. That's why you have a job. So it was an unfair expectation that she's like, well, I already told y'all to do this. It's the same thing I told you last time. I wrote you out a protocol. Why do you still need me to solve this for you? And not recognizing that they were never going to advance. That's why you had that position. That's why you got the training you got. So, but then is that on me too? Yeah, it's on me too then to not have realized sooner that her expectation wasn't,
right.
Because frankly, it was my first manager. I didn't know either.
Right.
And now going into it, I'm like, no, I think I don't want the young one. I want kind of the maternal one. I want somebody who's like 40 years old, like who has raised kids and understands, it's kind of like with our kids where we might go, man, why couldn't you figure out by now you needed to pack your lunch for tomorrow? Well, it just is. Like, it just is, right? Like, we can be irritated all we want to, but that's the nature of the beast. And so I think that's who I would be looking for now. But then the downside of that is back to, again, like, can you change?
And can you stay?
And can you stay? That would be the other one. Yeah.
I think, can you change, adapt? Can you live in that constant problem world, which is, I understand that that's difficult, but I think when you find a person that kind of thrives off of solving problems, it is, you called it unicorn. It is what we're looking for. We're looking for somebody that has this problem solving ability and yet also has this ability to nurture the team and keep them motivated. You're keeping them accountable, but you're also making them feel wanted and appreciated. It is really a delicate and difficult task that they take on. And honestly, I can think through all of my clients and I can spot some really good managers. I'm like, man, they are smart. They solve problems all day long. They've got this, camaraderie with the team. But there's probably two that I can think of right now that do it well. And so I think that's the hard part with a manager is if you're a doctor that's like, man, I'm tired. I guess I just need a manager. Yes, that may absolutely be a good path for you, especially if you're not a good problem solver. If you're just the technician that wants to put their head down.
Dare I say, honestly, I think that's our problem. A lot of us.
Yeah.
We're not good problem solvers.
Yeah. You're right. I would say that is oftentimes we're trying to tag somebody in because we know we're not. We know, hey, the problems are hard and I can't solve them all the time. So we tag in somebody. And I don't
enjoy it. Like, again, I enjoy doing the dentistry.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I started this practice, like, yes, I knew I'd have to deal with people, and yes, I knew I'd have to solve problems, but I guess something about it was like, well, everybody else is doing it. How hard could this be? I'll get my chairs, I'll get my drill, I'll get my patients. And we knew we'd have to solve some stuff sometime, but not to this level.
Yeah.
Like, not to this level. Like, every other day somebody's out. I mean, I knew staffing was going to be an issue, but hopefully my staff wasn't going to be that way. I was going to hire better. You know what I mean? Like, or just like all these stupid things that come up, and now you're like, I'm very guilty of that going, what, it should not be earth-shattering a surprise that the schedule fell apart, so we should fill it. Like, I can't help but getting super irritated with that, as you are taking the calls, what goes up must come down. You know what I mean? Like, why am I having to tell you this? Yeah. So if I was a true manager, like, that shouldn't bother me. It should be like, yes, chickies, like, mama's telling you, go ahead and fill the schedule. Like, I feel like those are some of the people that I think, like, have thrived in the role. Mm-hmm. They enjoy being mama bear. They enjoy being queen bee. Mm-hmm. And on my watch, I like telling you what to do. And unlike some of us that are like the thinkers, we're like, well, we can think. Like, it's a given and obvious that tomorrow needs to be filled.
Yeah.
And I'm irritated that you're not using your brain to fill it.
Right.
Versus the mama bear office manager that's just like, okay, chickies, like, the schedule fell apart. We need to fill it back. Like, who's doing it? Rah, rah, right? Like, yeah. So, I don't know. Where do you find that person? And then, again, for me, it's what about when that person leaves? Or what about when they suddenly say, I don't want $30 an hour. I want $60 an hour. Like, what am I going to do? Right. So I think that's my fear of a manager.
I think it's not only finding the right person. So I think that's half the battle right there is finding and picking a good manager. And I would say not settling for a mediocre manager, somebody that hey, they're good at the problem solving side, but their people skills suck. You don't want that risk on your team, because what will end up happening, and I've seen this happen so many times, is that office manager comes in, they're the doctor's right-hand person, but they run off every team member because they're so harsh.
And Dr. Kavita, who helps me, like, she said this to me a long time ago, and I was like, she is so right, where a practice she worked for, and that's exactly what happened. And she said, but you know what? Yeah, that manager had not a way with people. Like, if she could have just softened and changed her tone, she goes, but honestly, you need an alpha. You need somebody who's going to be like, nope, I'm not taking your BS. Like, this is the rule. You're going to do it. And she's like, the rest of us are all kind of like timid and scared to do that. But the manager, and she goes, she ran off everybody in that practice, but eventually the people she got on and kind of trained and molded, and then she was able to soften a little bit when she got people that she was able to, respond to her. Yeah. Because I think everybody else that had been there before had not had that managing style. It was very much the oldest person in the office was now their manager, and hence nobody was accountable to anything. Yeah. This person comes in, runs the show, wants to run the show, wants to be the be-all, end-all. Like, the doctor is not even clued into a lot of things. Like, he literally just wants to come in and do the dentistry. Mm-hmm. And this manager manages everything else. It works for them very well, but that's where, again, where she was like, she's like, you almost, Dr. KV was like, you almost have to have that person that likes to be that alpha and does not mind somebody being mad at them. She goes, but it takes a very, unique individual who
can do that.
It
is a very small percentage of people. And I would say any practice owner that's looking at hiring an office manager or moving to an office manager model, slow down and take your time to wait for the right person, because the damage that they can do is pretty intense.
So what about then from your thought process? Because again, for me, if I was looking for a manager, because part of me, like, pretty much, yes, we have a leadership team, but there's still pretty much one person that problem solves almost everything. And she'll, we'll punt to this one for this and that one for that. But for right now, she is pretty much it. But she's also happens to be the hygienist. So it's like the most expensive person, but also it's like, let her be the provider and somebody else should be managing this. We just not found anybody else effective enough by any stretch of the imagination to take over some of that, because it is such a delicate balance. So and again, for me to post on Indeed and bring in somebody who doesn't understand any of the dental anything and the nuances of our field, what is your thought on how would we look at our current team to say, like, that would be a good person, that would not be? Because I think that's what we've done in the past, is going, oh, well, somebody from the team who wants to do it, and the one person says they want to do it, and they can do like a quarter of the job decently well. So we're like, oh yeah, you're the manager now.
Yeah.
Or it's the person with most seniority. Is there anything that you would say that we could look for on our team, on our current team?
So I will say that
because at least that current team knows the culture.
It does. Okay. It does. There's pluses and minuses to elevating from within. The minuses are, I think, pretty obvious. Number one, that person has not been in a leadership role. And so there's a shift that has to happen in his or her relationship with the team. I've been coworkers. I haven't held you accountable to anything. And now, that was Monday, and Tuesday I'm office manager. And obviously I'm trying to draw a line here. Like, all of a sudden the role changes. And on Tuesday she walks in and now she's really the alpha. She has to be like that. I haven't seen it go well very often, I'll be honest. Because that person struggles to shift, or the team struggles to respond. Like, yesterday you were my coworker, today you're my boss.
You're telling me what to do.
And I don't like it.
Yeah.
And so it's very hard to do that. I'm not saying that it can't happen, but I think you're having to line out a really clear transition plan, and you're making it clear to the team. I've had one office that's done this successfully, and this was our plan. And it has worked extremely well. So this young lady came into the field and worked as a receptionist in this particular office. Strong potential. I spotted it early with her. I'm like, she's smart. She just driven, just had that just kind of drive. She naturally took charge of things, even though she was the newest one to the team. With women that were much older than her, she could be like, well, we got to drive in, we got to fix this problem. And so she was just naturally bent that way. The office manager that this gentleman had left to be home with children full time. And I said, I think this girl's got it. I think she's got what it takes. And so what we did is we communicated it had always been an office manager model office for as long as I'd worked with him. And so the team was very accustomed to having a point person. And looking at the team he had in place, I knew they wouldn't function well without an office manager. So we lined out a plan to the team. Hey, this lady is going to, we're putting her on a path of office manager. Within a year, this time next year, she will be office manager, and over this next year, there's going to be new categories that she starts to take ownership of. And so it was a very lined out plan with the soon to be office manager. She knew, you're not office manager yet, but you're taking on this for the next 3 months, and then you're taking on this. And then the last was actually the HR management side of it, where you'll start doing performance reviews. There were things that...
How did that go over with the rest of the team that was like, well, why didn't they pick me? I've been here longer.
So
did y'all have that problem?
No.
Okay.
That is why it worked. And this is what's important about that. None of the other people on the team wanted that role. And they had made that overtly clear, which is why they always preferred to have a manager. They were, two of them were like 3 days a week, kind of part-time-ish, because they had all these kids and activities and blah, 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 blah. Neither one of the two long-term people that had been there for a very long time wanted that at all. So it worked well for them because they wanted her to succeed in that position. This is why it doesn't work in most offices, because that is not the scenario. There's somebody on the team that's like, well, why did they pick her over me? I could have done it. I'm good at this, or I'm good at that. So you've got to have the right situation to promote from within. If you know nobody on your team wants that role, you could certainly find the one person on your team that does and is capable. So just because they want it doesn't mean that they're the right fit for the practice. So it can work promoting from within, but you've got to be really careful with that. Because if you promote the wrong person just because they've been there the longest, you've got now a bad manager, you've got a bad problem solver in the seat. Or if you've got two that wanted it and you picked one, you're highly likely going to lose the other one. And if she's a strong employee as well, then you've lost a good employee in that particular situation. So promoting from within, it can work, but it needs to be the right scenario. The right scenario meaning you do actually have somebody that can fulfill the role well. That's number one. Don't just promote somebody because they've been there the longest. And then number two, you've got a team that doesn't want that, and they're happy for that person to move into that position. And that's rare.
So I think in the first thing that you said, like, assuming that the one person that wants it can do it well, I think that's the other thing that we trip ourselves up on, because we've not really thought about what exactly we want managed and how we want it managed. And so we're like, how hard could it be? Like, she's been here long enough. She knows that the schedule needs to go this way, and she knows that that needs to happen that way. Like, she understands the culture and what we need, so she'll be just fine. And I think that's where I've gotten tripped up before, and then it was like, oh. Yes, like, she's going to be useless at this, she's going to be useless at that. She's the one who's going to be, looking at the HR side of who's coming and going. She's the one who's gone the most and putting in the request the most. So how could she be the one that anybody would take serious? So I think that's another one, just kind of maybe being self-aware or very honest about what it is that the practice needs. And maybe that means asking somebody else. Like, don't just trust your own opinion, because chances are we're not seeing a lot of what we should be seeing.
If they don't have the respect of their teammates, they may be good, in a good relationship with everybody, but if they don't have the ability to command respect, and you've got somebody on the team that's willing to tell you that, then that person doesn't need to be your manager. And again, could that person be trained? So I would say this is the other aspect that we need to think about, whether it's somebody that you promote from within, which again is rare. I just want to reiterate that it's very rare that will work. There are situations, but you need to be careful of that. But let's say you promote from within, or this person has potential. Don't put them in that manager seat until you have trained them. Invest in your manager. I think one of the things that helped your manager last so as long as she did, because she managed for a long time, is you were constantly exposing her to different courses, different content. At one point, one of my favorite magazines is the Harvard Business Review. You got her enrolled on that.
Because she asked for it.
Yeah. Yes. Which was an investment that you made in her, and she loved that. So she had this love of learning that kept her going, and you're like, I see that. I'm going to keep exposing her to things. And I think over time she became a better and better and better manager. And I think she was already skilled in a lot of ways. She was just naturally a very smart person. But I think you lengthened her stay as manager because she had all this exposure. If we're promoting somebody from within, I would say put a longer timeline on it. And maybe you're having conversations with your team about, hey, this person is working towards a management role in our practice. And working towards it means you're providing her with a lot of resources. And she needs to show proficiency in those things before you put a label on it. Well, guys, we did it again. We ran over our anticipated time talking about this subject matter. So stay tuned. We will pick right back up where we left off next week, talking about managers and do they reduce the stress enough to keep owning a practice. See you next week. Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone, but we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. Finally, we want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.